Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here with OneBC leader Dallas Brodie for another episode of OneBC Postgame, where we break down what happens in the legislature and all the other happenings in BC provincial politics. So the Musqueam thing is still a big deal right now, of course, Dallas, as it should be. But what was talked about in question period today?
Not one question in question period today about the Musqueam agreement, which is an agreement that's given the Musqueam Indian Band, a band of approximately 1,450 people, Aboriginal title over the entire lower mainland of British Columbia. And there were questions asked last week and now nothing. It's like it didn't even happen. I couldn't believe it.
Oh no, they've already conquered the issue. It's all solved now. They asked a couple pointed questions and now EB's on the run. Better stop. That's what you do when you're fighting a political war. As soon as you win a small battle, you let your enemy get out of there and reorganize and come back at you.
Bad idea.
I do not understand the rhetorical strategy of the BC Conservatives. It's almost like the issue makes them very uncomfortable.
Well, I think it does make them uncomfortable because everything about the Indigenous file leaves a lot of politicians scared. And this has been the whole problem over the last 25 years, is politicians engaging in what I call the politics of appeasement, if I said that properly, where they keep wanting this issue to go away in a nice way so that nobody comes after them and calls them names like I've been called over the past year.
Well,
it's not nice to be called names, but the thing is, it's our job to stand up for the constituents and the taxpayers of British Columbia, and that's our job. And yes, it's not always easy because people will scream and yell at you in the ledge, and this has become a very hot potato of an issue. But we are in this very position with politicians being afraid because of that, and it's due to their cowardice that we are in the bad position we're in today in British Columbia.
They probably just don't want to talk about it because it's a really good issue for OneBC and they're not willing to actually go far enough to fix it. So best to talk about it while it's in the headlines and then, basically stop talking about it right when the legacy media also wants to stop talking about it. The key word in the Musqueam agreement is incremental implementation. There's not one battle to be won here where you go after David Eby and you expose the fact that he lied about not knowing about the deal and then that's it. No. It's literally going to be something that will get worse over time, incrementally. They will do just enough that you won't really notice it over time. But what did the BC Conservatives ask questions about today in the question period in the legislature?
I'm glad you took notes because I was almost falling asleep. It was so boring today. I couldn't believe it. If I had questions like that, I'd be so on fire. But it was sleepy times today.
Okay,
it's brutal.
So let's go through these. First question was about the budget and wanting more funding for social housing. The second question was about the budget and wanting more funding for social housing. Third questions went to the Greens. They asked about something about permits and water. It's the BC Greens, who cares? The third question from the Conservatives was about PST on security for small businesses. Now that sucks. You're a small business owner already struggling, and the PST, 7% PST is being applied to the security services that you're having to purchase because of all the crime. That is bad.
Yep.
Okay, well, the next question was about the economy and small businesses. And then the next question after that was about the economy and small businesses and the PST issue. And wouldn't you know it, the last question asked by, I think the House leader, no, not the House leader, the guy basically leading the House, Peter Millibar, was a wrap-up where he talked about the budget, social housing, the PST, security, and healthcare. Okay, some of this can be asked, but where is the Musqueam question? People's private property and public property being undermined.
I know, and this is such an enormous deal, and it's people want to hear about it and talk about it. And if there's one job we have in here is to deal with this. This is such a big deal, and it's not just going to sink into the background now. There are now 3 agreements that have been signed with the Musqueam Indian Band that are giving right title, interest, control over waterways, streams, fisheries, you name it. This thing is the whole deal, and somehow we're already done speaking about it. Not at OneBC. I'm going to continue to stay on this because they mainly dealt with the secrecy last week and how David Eby claimed he didn't know about it. Then he claimed that he didn't read it, and then he claimed he hadn't been briefed and so on. And that's important too, because it shows his incompetence. But I don't believe that he didn't know about it, by the way. But now we've got to get into the meat of what this agreement really is, and we need to say, what is the NDP going to do about this? We need to call for this agreement to be completely withdrawn and retracted and removed from our life in British Columbia. This cannot go forward. It's a complete violation of the trust of the constituents, for sure, in my riding, and I'm sure other MLAs are feeling the heat in their ridings. What have they done to our title? And what you said, this word incremental implementation, this is an incremental implementation agreement. You know what that is called? It's called boiling the frog. You know, you're going to do little bit, so that you don't notice that your whole world is changing around you. And they're now saying that King Wayne Sparrow, as I call him, because he's now the king of the Lower Mainland, because he's got decision-making authority over everything, but nobody can vote him out because we're not allowed to vote for the band in council. He gets to say what he wants to do over the Lower Mainland and Vancouver. And he says, though, that he's never going to take away your house. He won't come after your private property, but apparently that's not in writing, and they're refusing to put that in writing. And even if they did put it in writing, this is about them having control over everything else in the Lower Mainland. If it's not specifically over your specific property, there will be ownership and right and title over everything that's around that property. And so you can see how that's going to affect your life in a very big way. And we need to stay on this file.
Yeah, well, we are going to be getting back to this in this video. I want to talk about a video that podcaster Aaron Pete made telling us all that there's nothing to worry about with the Musqueam agreement. You're just emotional. You're just reacting out of anxiety because of uncertainty, and this isn't actually that bad. But before I get to that, I actually do want to give a compliment to Conservative MLA for North Island, Anna Kindi. I thought she actually did have a good bill she introduced today about the HPOA, getting rid of it, which is the particular thing that she wants to do, which is the HPOA being this. It's what they did to basically the Law Society. They want the Law Society, the Health Practitioners Association, I think it's that?
Well, it's the Health Professionals Occupation Act, and what they're doing is they've changed it so that you will no longer, they've taken a whole bunch of medical colleges and compressed them down into 5 or 6. There used to be about 13 or 15, I think. And so like the chiropractors had their own college, the dentists had their own, they're compressing them down into 5 or 6 colleges. And instead of having practitioners in each of those fields running those colleges, you're now going to have political appointees and bureaucrats running these different colleges. And there's even worse things that are coming from this. The government can now go in and look at your medical files without a warrant and without any notice. They can just come in and say to your doctor, I'd like to see Jane Smith's medical files, and they can do that. They don't even have to state a reason. And doctors who spread what they're calling misinformation or disinformation can be fined, and it's a huge amount. I believe it's $500,000 and possibly 2 years in jail. And this is a drastic change to the practice of medicine in this province. And there's more to it than that, but those are really, really big things. And I've had representatives from the Psychologists Association come to me who live in my riding and said that they now have patients. They have patients, their psychologists have patients who are doctors themselves, who are having personal issues, who have had to say that now, because the audit notes from these psychology sessions could be made available to the government, these doctors can no longer come for psychological assistance because they're afraid that their personal life will be made available to the government. And so this one psychologist says 2 doctors already have told her that, and another patient she had that has another sort of a high-profile career cannot come anymore either, because people are afraid now to get help. And then she also said that approximately half the psychologists she believes in BC are going to stop practicing here because this is a violation of the privacy of their patients. And you have to keep notes when you're a doctor. You can't remember every detail from each session. So these notes that they take while they're talking to you are important to them. But imagine if your personal details could be made available to someone in the government, which they will be. You can
especially
bet.
if someone just wants to personally destroy you in
Yes.
some way and want to make your life, just a living nightmare. And so if they want to find reasons to say, oh, maybe this person's not mentally stable, they
Yes.
cannot keep practicing medicine, or somebody just going to the doctor, people are able to review their medical records and just find anything in order to increase your insurance for no reason.
Yeah, maybe
just
so
leak it
and so
out.
has got a drug problem. Maybe so and so has got an alcohol problem. Maybe someone is experiencing abuse at home, and all of these things to maybe designate this person as being unstable or something like that. And now they can't go and even talk to a psychologist about it. This is a real and present problem going on right now. It's been raised in the ledge, and the Minister of Health, Josie Osborne, just ignores it. And then anybody who asks questions about this act, they are immediately called anti-vaxxers and crazy tinfoil hat conspiracists. And
Well, this is something we didn't talk about last Thursday just because we didn't have time. The premier went after Kindy in a really nasty way last Thursday. Basically said, oh, well, this is the person who sat on the stage with an anti-vaxxer doctor or whatever. It's like, okay.
That was brutal.
What does that have to do with anything that she's saying? And you're even attacking her. It doesn't even matter what the person was. You're attacking her because she was sat next to somebody else.
Yep.
It's literally the definition of guilt by association. You did nothing, but you sat next to somebody that he doesn't like.
When you ask a valid question of this government, what they do is engage in character assassination. And going after Anna Kindy that way was absolutely disgusting. That was such bullying that I watched the premier engage in against MLA Kindy. That was incredible. She's actually a former physician who's given up her work to come here and advocate because she's very concerned. Her one thing is this HPOA is extremely dangerous to the privacy of people in this province. There's nothing more personal than your medical information, and the government has no right to have that. And I want people to understand that as of April 1st, your privacy when it comes to your medical information is really at risk. And they can say, oh, we'd never abuse this right. I don't believe that for a second, because we know what they do when they get lists of people. They can access anything they want if they want to take you down or undermine you.
Well, that reminds me of what Wayne Sparrow says about private property. We're not coming after your private property, because in a statement drafted by a PR firm, I said we aren't, even though the agreement totally lets me violate your private property rights if I want, because my Aboriginal land title sits above everyone else's, by definition from the Interpretations Act amendment that was passed by the NDP government during that, the Atmospheric River from 2021. They were able to pass something that defines Aboriginal title above everything else by definition. But now I want to go into the Aaron Pete podcast, because you and I this morning suffered, and I mean suffered, through this man's video trying to explain like an adult what this Musqueam agreement actually does. Because apparently there's a bunch of right-wing people out there who don't understand it. They might have some understandable emotional reactions to it. This is effectively what he's saying. But they aren't getting the substance of it right. And if this was just explained to them, they wouldn't be freaking out about it. I thought it was one of the most patronizing things I've listened to this week.
It was patronizing because people are legitimately concerned about this in the wake of the Cowichan decision and in the wake of the development that's gone up. Everybody in the Lower Mainland's seen it. It's right near the south. It's at the south end of the Burrard Street Bridge. We know what happens when lands are granted to bands and they get to develop whatever the heck they want on there without regard to any zoning bylaws. So we've got proof from the Sinnock development what's in store for us. But when Aboriginal title is declared over an area and they get access to lands that could be developed. Then we've got also an example from the Cowichan decision that that private property is effective and your title is defective and invalid now, according to that judge. And when the counsel for the Cowichan ban was asked, what does this mean about buying and selling the private properties there? Counsel said, well, it's true, you're going to have to deal with the band if you want to deal with your property now. So if you want to sell it, there's an assumption there now that you will have to speak to the band about what you're doing here, because they share title with you now. And this is what people have been trying to say. You can't have two titles on one property. And everybody's been wanting to skirt around this thorny issue of how you can have two people having right and title to the same property. It doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. And so This is the problem.
Yeah.
It was all easy when the land being given was way up north and nobody really knew what was going on, and it's, a field or a pasture. And now we're right into the lower mainland of BC. But let's get back to this, what we heard today, that our concerns about private property in this Musqueam Indian Band agreement is apparently just feelings. People are feeling scared, but they shouldn't be scared, says Aaron.
That's the obnoxious thing about it. It's like if somebody hit you with their car. Basically the lower mainland was hit by the Musqueam car, and they said, and Aaron Pete's basically here to say, if I explain it to you long enough and tell you all the motivations and intentions of the person who hit you with their car, would that make it all better? And you're like, no. They're just like, that Wayne Sparrow doesn't actually mean to violate your private property rights. He just wants Aboriginal rights and title recognized. And he's hoping that you're going to forget what you already know about the Cowichan situation, where the judge said, their title, your title still exists, but theirs sits over top of yours. So
and yours is defective. And
then Aaron Pete comes in and says, it's not like they're like, I'm paraphrasing, I'm being jokey here, obviously. They're not gonna like Wayne Sparrow's not gonna kick down your door and use your bathtub anytime soon. It's like, okay, I know that the Musqueam band members aren't gonna repossess houses, but we have issues around who am I gonna be paying property taxes to? If I want to build a deck, am I still allowed to do that? Are we going to have all of the sidewalks and the street names and the light poles all changed? Is this now going to be a loophole where some developers, if you work with the band, can get anything they want built while everyone else packs sand? These are real problems. It's not emotions. It's not anxiety. It's not uncertainty. It's a problem.
It's a problem. And no one wants to the devil is always in the details in anything in life. And, this is the hard part about this. And I keep asking, why does a band of 1,450 people, only half of whom apparently even live on the reserve, need to have title over the whole lower mainland of British Columbia? This band already owns vast tracts of land in one of the most expensive areas, expensive real estate in the province, and they're making lots of money, and there's a good lifestyle for everyone there. And you have to ask, what are you doing then? Why do you need this? If it's not to pull money out of it somehow, pull power out, it's got to be that somehow you're going to be pulling a bunch of money out of this. And you're going to manage the fisheries? They're saying that the Musqueam have a special way of managing the fisheries. But do we even know if that's true? And how can Wayne Sparrow manage his band and the whole lower mainland of Vancouver? I mean, I don't understand. Is this going to be a whole new government?
Well, what's the limiting principle here? Because what you'll have people like Aaron Pete in the podcast say is that this is just falling in line. This is basically everything that Section 35 already says of the Constitution, of the Charter. More reason than ever to amend it and either remove Section 35 or basically just say that Indigenous people have the same rights as any other Canadian. Because if he's saying all these things were never in Section 35 back in 1982, there's been one amendment since then. It was 1989, and it didn't add anything special. These are rights the Supreme Court is interpreting into Section 35 with no actual evidence. Aboriginal land title is something that they made up. And what's the limiting principle here? Why can't they say, actually, our borders are 10 kilometers more that way? But what actually stops them? It's just based on oral history, which is also known as multi-generation hearsay.
It is, and of course now we've got 3 other bands claiming the same area. So the problems have already begun, and it's barely out of the gate. And by the way, there are 3 agreements, and it's a troika of agreements, and we've only been allowed to see one of them, which they didn't even want you to see. So we've now seen one, and you've got to pick up a copy of it. It's quite something. And then the other 2 agreements are still being held secret. Let's look at some of the words that Aaron Pete used today. He said, he's talking about incremental implementation, shared decision making, recognition, partnership, and capacity, relationship building. People are overreacting. What's the other thing? That we need to build trust, reduce conflict, and there's ambiguity, and that's what's causing the problems. No, there's more than there's quite a bit of certainty here. Actually, there's not a lot of ambiguity in this agreement.
Aaron Pete's podcast's name, by the way, is Nuanced with Aaron Pete. I suggest he change the name to Gaslighting with Aaron Pete. Everything he does in the podcast is telling you to mentally de-escalate, intellectually, just go down. And he starts the video off saying, we're going to talk like adults here. And then he talks to you like he's a substitute teacher in front of a grade 6 class about how you just need to, just to calm down, children.
Calm down,
guys,
everybody.
It's just about cooperation.
It's all going to be okay. I'll give you a blankie and some apple juice.
Working together and having
some arrowroot cookies.
Joint decision making. And you're thinking, like, joint decision making? I'm sorry, that's not something that just needs to be explained to people better. People fully understand what that means, and they don't have like an emotional reaction to it. It's anger. That anger is coming from the fact that it's a problem. Again, someone hit you with a car. You don't just have feelings about the contact with the vehicle. You were hit by a car. This is a legal hit by a car. And no, people don't just need physics explained to them and why they went flying when they hit the windshield. They need, compensation. They want this reversed. They are owed something from you. This entire agreement should be thrown out. It doesn't need to be explained better. It sucks.
Yeah, the agreement's terrible. It needs to be thrown out, retracted, and pulled back. And the Musqueam Indian Band needs to do this right away and say that they're not interested in pursuing this because they want to be neighborly with the rest of the people living in Vancouver. That's what really needs to happen here, because all this is doing is causing incredible angst. It's affecting the economy, and also let's talk about the fact that how long do we reconcile? I mean, this agreement in itself is going to start on another long path towards reconciling. What it really looks like is this is decolonization and indigenization on steroids, and that's what's coming our way. And people haven't had a chance to vote on this specific type of rollout, and we can't vote Wayne Sparrow out of his spot. We don't have a right to vote for the band. The band owes no duty under the Indian Act to any of the taxpayers of British Columbia. They only owe a fiduciary duty to their band members. And then we've got Wade Grant sitting there. His mom negotiated this deal. Wendy Grant is the chief negotiator of this deal. His uncle is Wayne Sparrow, and he's now the MP, the Member of Parliament for Vancouver Quadra. And he's basically known about this deal being negotiated for years. They said they've been working on it for 10 years. I don't know that, but
he was on the council between 2004 and 2014, but that doesn't get him off the hook, because after that he was the Indigenous Affairs advisor to then Premier Christy Clark. He has had many other lobbying type positions. He is very much a well-connected person who's in the know. He'd have to just basically be massively incompetent to not know about this, or he's lying. And he hasn't actually even denied that he didn't know about it. He's just tried to punt the ball down the field and just call everyone racist, or basically say everyone's misinterpreting the Aaron Pete playbook.
But he has to
Not that
resign.
Aaron Pete called anyone racist, by the way, the punting it down the field.
Wade Grant must resign immediately from his position as an MP for Vancouver Quadra. He cannot self-deal with his band, for him and his band on this side, for the entire Lower Mainland, and also represent the property owners and taxpayers of Vancouver Quadra. It's impossible. That is the very definition of a conflict of interest, where you have interests on both sides and you're in the middle. Real estate agents have to declare where they stand on issues. This is a conflict. It is the very definition of a conflict.
Here's a great example of it. Brandon Johnson, current mayor of Chicago, is a member of the teachers union in Illinois, in Chicago. And he was negotiating with the teachers because they were funding schools locally there. And he was not recusing himself or not leaving as a member of the teachers union. And even people could say, well, it doesn't really matter, it'd just be symbolic. People understand it's unethical negotiating a deal in which you also benefit on the other side of it. That you are you're a politician in government who's supposed to be making decisions in the best interests of everyone, but you also, if you do a bad job making the deal and it ends up benefiting this particular special group, you benefit massively too. That's a scandal in Chicago. We have somebody who's a member of something that no one else can even join. You can't just become Musqueam and get in on it
No,
too.
you can't.
In Chicago, you can at least become a teacher. You know, what the heck? You can just basically not obscure this information from other people, knowing that the public having less information makes the deal better for you as a member of the Musqueam band. Maybe that's not exactly what he's thinking, but this is the problem with conflicts of interest. It doesn't matter what his motive is, he failed to act.
And then someone said to me, well, he wasn't specifically on the negotiating team. I'm like, no, that doesn't matter. He's a beneficiary, a direct beneficiary of this agreement. I mean,
Just because you're not a voting member of a company's board doesn't mean if you're in politics you can just start signing deals with a company that you have an invested interest in.
no, for example,
It's like
I have
Carney
to
doesn't have to be on Brookfield's board right
No.
now for it to be a conflict of interest when Brookfield asset management's companies, all the organizations they have stakes in, are getting contracts all over the place.
That's correct. Like, I have to declare what I own to the legislature, to the conflict of interest commissioner, so that they make sure that I'm not in a conflict of interest in my public role. This is so fundamental, and really, and then when my staffer Masha Kleiner went into Wade's office, what do we see there?
Yeah, to ask them literally just about this question.
Yes.
You have a conflict of interest.
What do
you say about all this? I actually want to bring Masha in. I'm going to force her to come onto the show now.
Okay.
Because she had the more theatrical part of this whole story here. I'm going to force you to come in, Masha. She was the one who handed me an umbrella the other day in another video. I'm actually going to have you take over and tell the story of what happened. There you go.
It's a great honor to be sitting in the chair of Wyatt Claypool. Hello, everyone.
So I just wanted to say this is Masha Kleiner. She is our research director, and she's also my constituency assistant. And you went on a little field trip the other day.
Well, I happen to live in a riding where Wade Grant happens to be an MP. So this affects me personally, obviously, because I live in Vancouver. And I decided to stop by the office and ask him about this agreement and what he feels about him being in a conflict of interest. He wasn't there, but his staffers were there. And funny story, it turned out that his staffers were actually part of the mob that mobbed us at UBC on January 22nd. We have them on video, and one of them is blowing a horn in our
The
face.
handheld horn blowing it at us at UBC that day. That's one of Wade's staffers. And the other one yelled at me like 6 inches away from my face and berated me at UBC for not having a legislative office open yet. And when I tried to explain to him, I'm not in control of the legislative office. It's the legislature itself that arranges the office for everyone. He basically just yelled over top of me, looked into the camera and said, it's been a year and this ridiculous MLA doesn't have and it was just such bullying. These guys are bullies, blowing horns at me, yelling in my face, and there they were in the office of Wade Grant. And what else did we see at Wade Grant's office? Another big reveal.
It's actually a very pretty office, and it took me a while to walk around it, and I filmed the wall and the books and the pictures, and also 3 flags right there in the center. There is the British Columbia flag, the Canadian flag, and the flag of the Musqueam Indian Band, which is, if we consider Musqueam to be a nation, First Nation,
It's a nation.
then it's another nation's flag. So how can you be a member of parliament in the Canadian parliament and also fly a flag of a different nation?
It's extremely clear that Wade sees the Musqueam Indian Band flag as being in equal prominence to the flag of British Columbia and the flag of Canada. That's unacceptable. And here we are again, the conflict of interest on full display, the flags displayed with equal prominence, all 3 of them, all in a nice little tidy thing with 3 flags as if they're all equal, coexisting levels of government and or nations. And you see, it's getting complicated, isn't it?
It is, and probably this is why Wade and his staff took such great offense of me filming in the office, as if me filming is actually the center of the problem. And obviously the mainstream media ran with their stories and tried to force me to apologize for filming and completely ignoring the actual problem of the conflict of interest and the violent staffer that were part of the violent mob at UBC, which is, I think, the core of the story here.
I think it is the core of the story here, and I there's just so many levels to this story. And another thing that I found very interesting is that as soon as there's something that involved Wade Grant's office, he calls the local TV station, and they came running up. I was having a constituency luncheon this weekend and on Saturday. They call this TV station, they'll bring out a cameraman, reporter, everything to report on something that Wade Grant calls up and phones the media about. If Dallas Brodie phoned the media and said, I need to report something to you, they'd be like, yawn, see you later, we're not interested. But you can see the Praetorian Guard that comes out for the certain special people in government. And when you're on the right side of the fence here, which is showing media bias. And it's so obvious to me how the legacy media is really controlling the narrative in British Columbia. It happens here in the legislature. They downplay anything to do with the things that I say, but amp up things that are really irrelevant and really not the center of interest of a lot of British Columbians. And they're trying to silence me, pretend I don't even exist. I know that. But, I'm going to tell all of you that I'm not going to stop fighting over here, and I'm going to keep going. And I am going to keep calling on Wade Grant to resign immediately, because obviously he's not going to resign from his band. So a choice has to be made here, Wade. It's time for you to make a choice. And Wayne Sparrow, I'd like to ask you, what in heaven's name are you doing in laying claim to the entire lower mainland of British Columbia? Why do you need this? And then you have to look at all the developers licking their lips and thinking of all the land they will get access to through this band in the future. This is what's coming. And just take a look at Sinnock and you're going to see density and development like you've never seen before. That's my prediction of what this is really all about. And maybe you're going to see the indigenization of your neighborhoods and things and changes of your street names, because it's already happening. So
one last thing I want to say about the luncheon that we had on Saturday in the constituency. The members of the Musqueam band, just a few of them, but they came to protest again Dallas meeting with her constituents in her riding. And what they actually told me is that they own all the land and I am not welcome. I am an uninvited guest. We all are, not just me, even another woman that was walking
They told you to go back to Russia.
Yes.
They told her to go back to Russia. These are representatives from the Musqueam Indian band. 4 or 5 of them came and yelled at Masha and told her she wasn't welcome here and she should go home.
But they also yelled at your constituent whose family goes back hundreds of
200
years and told
she
her
said,
also to go back to Europe where her great-parents came from, and they brought with them some Hamas supporters to help them protest against Dallas. So that was an interesting
But the Hamas supporter, apparently, he's from Iran, and he apparently, they said, Masha said, well, why don't you go home then? He said, no, I've been invited to be here. And the Musqueam people said, no, we've invited him to stay here. We let him come. He's a welcome guest. But they kept saying to Masha, she's got to go home. And they've told all of us to go home. So if you think this is really about sharing and recognition, partnership, relationship building, incremental implementation, and shared decision making, I call BS on that, and I'm going to keep saying it. I don't believe it, and all of this needs to be done with. We're really done reconciling. This has got to come to an end. There has to be a limit to this, because I'm talking to constituents and they're fed up.
Well, I'll force the close to the episode here. Thank you, Masha, for jumping in here. Actually, the one thing I want to mention about the flags too is, this doesn't matter on a technical level, but it's just for the illogic of Wade Grant saying, "Well, I have the Musqueam flag in my office because I'm a proud Musqueam man as well." It's like, well, you're also Chinese. Would it be equally illegitimate to have just a flag from the PRC sitting in the office? Because that's effectively what he's saying. Well, we obviously know that's absurd, that an elected representative would just have the English flag or the French flag or Nigeria or Russia or Israel or anything flying in their office prominently right next to the other flags as if it's one of the other places there. And you can say, well, the Musqueam band is in the riding too. I'm like, no, that's not how that works though. They're a separate nation. It doesn't represent anyone but them. Just as it wouldn't, a Chinese flag would not represent anyone who was not Chinese. That's the problem. It's an ethnic flag.
He's an MP for the government of Canada, representing a British Columbia riding. The only two appropriate flags there are the Canadian flag and the flag of British Columbia. And the fact that the Musqueam Indian Reserve is in Vancouver Quadra is irrelevant. They are members of the Vancouver Quadra riding in that capacity. See, this is where it gets tricky. Are you part of Vancouver Quadra Musqueam Indian Band, or are you starting your own country?
Because that's effectively what they're trying to define as a nation. That they have their own right to make just like joint decision making between governments. It's a completely different location. They treat it like they have their own agency to make decisions. They have their own jurisdiction and whatnot. It's like that sounds like it's like a separate other level of government or a completely different country.
Yeah, I mean, if you get really into this, it's like, well, if you're a different country, then you have to set up your own government. You have to have your own police force, your own fire department, your own hospitals. You know, you can't just use the things that you like and then say you're a nation when you're still using everything that's been provided by all the other taxpayers.
Yeah.
I mean,
is Wayne Sparrow ever going to help contribute to the RCMP's budget,
right,
to the VPD, to make sure that we're having the streets are policed? Or because the thing is that they say, oh, it's a great agreement because it allows for more economic sustainability or self-sufficiency. It's like, well, they're not going to contribute any of the massive amounts of money that they'll be taking from taxpayers that they already get and trying to make the streets safer, put some money into addictions programs. We've had First Nations people coming to us and saying you should cut the money off to these programs on reserves because they don't use the money for what it's earmarked for. They tell you to go to the hospital down the street if you want medical care, even though they are supposed to be providing it locally on reserve. And, you know, piss off, go somewhere else. You know, go to the hospital down the street. We'd rather just pay ourselves the health budget without actually spending it on real health care.
and that is happening because I've had phone calls with people who are working as healthcare workers on the reserve, and they just say, no, I don't want to deal with her, send her to the other hospital. And so we're not just blabbing on here. I've now had so many phone calls from people telling me what's really going on. But fundamentally here, what are we doing here in British Columbia? Has anybody ever stopped to say, this is enough? We can't go on like this. The money's running out, and we can't go forward with a race-based system of rules in this province. Many people are unhappy about this, and they feel left out of the discussion because they are. Because a lot of the MLAs here, well, federal MPs and provincial MLAs do not want to touch this issue. And maybe I'm the only crazy one to do this, but I have to do this because I'm actually a Vancouverite, and I'm very concerned about the future of our city.
Yep. Well, that's something we should talk about in another podcast. Like, the federal Conservatives talk about this issue. The Mark Carney just signed the craziest agreement, a crazier one than even David Eby or anyone before him had signed. It's such a hot issue. Like, it's so inside baseball to talk about it this way, but it's like Mark Carney just did one of the dumbest things possible that proves he's not a very good businessman, and you're not going to touch it because it's like, oh, it's First Nation stuff. Oh, but guys, rip the Band-Aid off. It's actually a good issue to talk about. But anyways, well, thank you guys for watching another episode of the OneBC post-game podcast. Hopefully you've been liking this. Make sure to like the channel or subscribe to it, like the video, leave a comment about what you think, and we will be back in a couple of days with more stuff going on at the BC legislature.
Let's hope for a more lively question period tomorrow. I think I get a question on Thursday, don't I?
Yes.
Yay, I get a question on Thursday. It'll be a zinger.